Hey guys, I'm glad you can make it. Welcome back. I'm in my studio and I just finished a monumental task. So I'm feeling pretty laid back and I'm taking a break. Not that kind of break and not being that laid back. I'm Batista and my friends call me Bunny. It's a long comical story. Let's just say I'm magical, like my wristband says. I want to thank you again for joining me. And before we get started, please hit the like, subscribe, leave a comment below, do all the algorithms things, subscribe, hit that notification bell so we can get on with things. I'm going to show you some examples from some of my collection, and really what our goal is today is to understand the unique devices used in graphic novels that make this art form different than any other type. This is episode 74, The Language of Graphic Novels and Comic Books, Part 3, Layout, Panels, and Text Elements. We're going to work differently this episode. I'm going to show you some examples. I'm going to clear off the table and put a big sheet of paper down, and the notes and what we're going to talk about will be made by shooting over my shoulder. So if you have a sketchbook and you want to take notes and draw along, please go get that now because I'm not going to wait long. I wanted to share with you this very unique take on panels in a graphic novel. This is Red, a Haida manga by visual artist Michael Nicol Yagulanis. He had an exhibition on at the Glenbow Museum, and I saw this in the store and picked it up. And what's really cool is what's inside. If you look at these big, thick black lines, he's taken a unique way of separating the story panels. Normally we'd see rectangles and sometimes circles, but here we see these dark black lines. It makes for an interesting way to read the comic book, but more importantly, if you took out all the pages, I'm just going to flip out the cover here and put them all back together. You get this beautiful extra piece of Haida art. So you can see that the panels are broken up and the lines that make them make up this other image. The first page of the comic book starts up here and goes through the entire story all the way to the end. So this is a really cool way to think of comic books and time and visual artists, and maybe even play a little bit on the history we studied 2 episodes ago. I want to share with you guys this. Inside here is my Sergio Aragonés Gru the Wanderer Artist Edition. You might remember from the first episode in the series, episode 72, I was reading Gru. And Sergio is one of my favorite cartoonists. And these artist editions are really cool. You can see they're nice and big. And inside, we will see what's so cool about these. You can see the artist's preliminary planned drawings. So you can see the panels and the gutters and some of the word bubbles. And they can show you some of the cover layout design. You can see the artist's blue marking pencil and some of the special papers that they're using. You can also see some of their whiteout mistakes. So here are some covers, some of the barcode placement, also some of the other things that you have to have in a cover design. What I love about this is seeing the splash pages. You can tell this one's a little bit old. It's yellowed over time. But in Gru, there's always the outline title. Every Gru, Mark Evanier does a fun little rhyme. And we also have the credits on this page. But just look, you're turning the first page of Gru, and there's this massive amount of characters and things going on. One of the things I find really cool about this book is you can see like the photocopy and tape in of the title mark for Gru the Wanderer. You can see the little blue outline that happens before they do the inking. Some of the placements of the different elements, this being for a cover. Here we can see the splash page. An intro page where it brings you into the story, but also down here at the bottom you can see all the credit information. One other thing I might mention is these are the panels, and the space between the panels here we call the gutter, and basically the line around is the frame. Another artist take is you don't have to do, the traditional black line, but also the panels don't have to be equal squares. You can have open spaces. I love the way the artist dealt with this page. The whole thing looks beautiful, but also the spacing and the timing of the frames. The first thing I want to start off with is rhythm. So when we're drawing our panels, having a bunch of panels the same shape and size is not so dissimilar to notes in music. So in terms of the timing, we can look at Matt Groening, Life is Hell. Each square is the same amount of beat. And as they go across, these things get bigger. So a bigger panel, you spend more time on. It's not just the amount of detail that you have inside of a panel. You can also stagger them like this. We read from left to right and then down to the bottom of the page. So there's a rhythm. Beats like a staccato. You can show the past with like a dotted line. You can have a panel be a thought. So like we'll see with text, a thought bubble. There are different ways to draw action. And it's like these panels are tearing through time. They can be a window into something. Or if you think of like James Bond films, they can be, binoculars. So how you control the frame, you control time, but you also control the view. So this is separate from talking about how the shots might look. We're going to talk about that in the next episode. But I want you to think about how you're portraying the framing of the panels, how it relates to timing, and how it relates to helping the story move along. There are other things that you can do with panels as well. You can show the panel as if, let's say, it's a Polaroid photo. So you could just write date and time and have your artwork in the middle here. So this could be date and time, and inside of it, we can have the day or time that you watched a television. So you can have an image on the TV set. You could have some information portrayed in your story here on the stamp, on an address, like who's it to. It could be a letter, front or back. So using an image of things that we see or have in life to explain some of your information, receiving or getting information through a letter. You could show someone holding their phone, and on that phone, you can have your text bubbles. So, a discussion going on through the devices. Something like even a laptop might be useful in the drawing itself. Or, so you have the laptop and then you have the frame that shows the data or shows that they're searching something on Google. One other one that I'll mention that kind of relates to how we look. You could use a panel that's a keyhole. So someone could be voyeuristically spying through, and your panel here could be this way. The other types of panels are like a doorway. Just like an open window, we can show someone opening a door in a frame, and then in the next frame showing, what they see. And it's the devil. Welcome to hell, with some fire behind them. So the frame and panels break up the segments and section of time. They give the language in which you're speaking, how you're seeing things through time. You can use them to show thoughts. You can use them to show past things. You can also use, in your past windows, you can make things black and white or kind of smoky looking. You can even use them to show future things. This is more like mechanical or industrial thoughts. It almost, you'll see when we do the tech stuff, they almost give you a sense of sound as well. And there's many more than what I'm mentioning here. You might put other small panels or break it up into boxes that sit in different ways, atop or below. You can have your artwork cross over and out of the panel, what we call breaking the fourth wall, and you see that in things like Deadpool. You can also break the fourth wall by having your character face and talk to the reader in the comic book, which is a really, really interesting thing to do, I think. Wavy edges show past time. Clouds show thought or memory. Past time. And within these, we can also have little narration boxes. So these narration boxes, you know, often they're used at the front of a story that set the stage and setting, or I'll see them colored yellow, and that will be where a narrator's voice could be placed. So it's almost like you have space and time, but you have an outside influence coming in. So this is different than seeing the character within the panel talking. This is the outside voice talking in to give us more information on what we're seeing. I want you to think of each comic book page, or if this is 2 pages, as an ultimate piece of artwork that tells the story. So maybe you have lots of panels and timing, and then you have a big splash page. When we looked at the Gru splash pages, there was so much going on, and it allowed you to move your eye through and discover. But that's created entirely from the art, and not from how you're paneling your frames. The other thing I'll just mention about narration boxes, and we saw it with Mark Evanier, you can have little ribbons. You can have, you know, scrolls that kind of can be used in his case for poetry. So other ways that we see writing, you know, you can have little feathers, just different things, leaves falling, to show the passage of time. That's what's really important here, because we need to control how the viewer is looking at this comic. How fast are they reading? Fast action, slow, take more time. Also, you could fill a whole page with lots of information, or maybe you have a reason to have nearly no information in the page. They don't necessarily have to be rectangular. The panel itself could be an arrow who directs the way you're looking. You can have the panel have some sort of cool effect. So this could be like ooze or goop or blood, you know, dropping down the panel. If it's a really gruesome scene, have the panels and then have it open, maybe have some landscape elements, so your eye follows and travels through. Maybe there's a waterfall happening, and then another panel. So it can kind of dance through and guide through space. You know, this is almost like the yellow brick road. Having the viewer go through and connecting the spaces, and then maybe it's a train. You know, maybe in this scene the character is traveling all sorts of different ways. There's an air balloon up here. I want you to think about how the panels can be descriptive and increase your story. This could trail off the page, giving the viewer the excitement of turning and finding out what will happen next. Now, back in the days, what they would do is a guy would take the ruler and he would run horizontal lines, and text was done by hand. And they were done specifically by the letterer. And so they had a font they would use. So I've got lowercase here, but you could also do capitals and make things really bold, right? They stand out a little bit more. One thing that we did in the comic books that I worked on is we would also use cursive, or using color to define how different individuals were talking. The first one, of course, being the bubble. Now, the bubble needs to have this little arrow and point to the guy talking. I've also seen, bubbles with a line. That works nicely too. If you have 2 people conversing, you can stack the bubbles. So you can have the bubble coming from the person, and then the person over here talking, and then the bubble could go down and then have another sound bite, you know, like you could have them go from him to him to him. You can have the bubbles also have like an inset bubble. So that gives the viewer the idea that these words happen first, then there. Sometimes it's a design thing where you might have some of the drawing that you need to fit in. You know, you can just attach another bubble. Bubbles don't have to be rounded either. They can be more square. But also with bubbles, we have our thought bubble. Here, we'll do the devil right here. These drawings I do under the camera like this, I never know what they're going to be. They're, I like to add little bubble elements around my, like little clouds. So thought bubbles are ideas. So here's a little Edison style light bulb. If you have things like the phone or the laptop, your bubbles can have kind of like an electronic sound type bubble, and they could shoot out of the device, kind of like a lightning bolt. Electronic bubbles or voice-shaped bubbles. The other interesting thing that we have, which we alluded to here with the light bulb, are symbols. Symbols are when you use a drawing to represent more ideas. So rather, you know, someone has to go to the toilet, you know, like, hey, what are you doing today, Frank? Well, rather than write, I have to go to the toilet, maybe it's a little nicer to draw, I gotta go, you know? And maybe, gotta go where? Maybe you just draw the thing. Woo, she's a stinker. We see this a lot today in emojis. So we can use emojis. I haven't really seen an emoji cartoon yet, but they're being used so much by us today that maybe you want to incorporate, you know, symbols. Happy face would be a symbol. You know, hearts, same thing. So there are things in our language and lexicon that can be drawn, because I think pictures, they say 1,000 words and you can do a lot more with them than with text. Here we could also just have some clouds and some birds. What about here, showing maybe more time? I could just draw like a spider's web, right? Because it takes the spider a long time to spin their web. We can also do little combinations where we have, you know, kind of like an explosion of energy. This is almost like popcorn, what I'm drawing here. Here too, making a little bit of sound effects as I draw, but maybe our bubbles show what we intend to be happening, and you'll see this with Onomatopoeia, very similar things. In terms of symbols, something that maybe can relate to this could be the old classic from Spy versus Spy kind of thing. The light bulb is an idea. This is, you know, an explosive idea. Literally showing a bomb here. Maybe that's what leads to this. I don't know. We're just free-form comicking here. Symbols like we see on our cards, or a four-leaf clover could symbolize luck. The other thing I didn't really mention is how these things come off the page, but you can use a drop shadow to create a little three-dimensional distance on your objects and symbols. Also use one of my favorites things, right? You see this on bottles and things, is skulls and crossbones. This can mean poisonous or death. You can use little lines, wavy lines, to show heat or stink. Maybe that's why there's a little fly right here. Use lines like a parenthesis around something, and that kind of shows that they're shaking, or drawing it a few times but in less and less opacity can show vibration, so showing some sort of movement. We can show movement through time, through actions happening, or we can show movement graphically by drawing it. You could do big exclamation points. So symbol can also be for sounds or words, which is the next thing I want to talk about, which is onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia, action words or sound. You see these kind of things. Pow! So the word is a sound that you say in your mind, but it's also graphical, a drawing. And this really is unique to comic books. Now you see it a little bit in comic book type movies. The way you draw it should also, look like the sound a little bit, like pointy zap. Just color this in for a second. Ring. We don't really have rings anymore. They can be musical notes, right? So if you are putting in lyrics to a song, even the old Happy Birthday, you can show it different ways. Knocking on doors. I didn't actually draw a door. There, we'll quickly draw a little door. Knock, kind of do knock things, maybe throw a couple little dots, a little smoke here. Your goal in drawing is to use the pictures to replace anywhere that you might need words. This is smoke, by the way. Where there's smoke, there's fire. You should get really good at drawing fire, I think. Maybe you don't need fire in your comic book story. But I want you to think about where you can use pictures to replace the content of the words. Because pictures say 1,000 words, and you can say a whole lot more with your pictures than words. In design, the idea is if you can draw an apple, you don't also need to write the word apple. And when we were in kindergarten, you might remember there was that alphabet over the board. And it had a picture of the apple with the word apple. Well, that's implicit. You don't need to put both things together. We may want to use drawings to symbolize sound, but also to symbolize effects or action, things that are wet, things that are slimy, things that are sticky. You want to give the most sensory experience you can. And human beings, we don't just see, we don't just read, we might hear things in our mind because the comic book pages themselves can't emit sound, but you want it to be engaging and colorful. So consider touching on experiential senses. Humans can see, hear, feel, smell, taste. Maybe you could, draw that old, infamous turkey. You see these in Disney films all the time too, So that tells me, food, or better yet, my favorite thing to eat, and probably yours too, a little slice of pizza. Maybe add more depth to the information by touching on those senses, so that you don't have to say something silly like, I really like pizza. You can just show pizza and a happy, hungry guy loving the pizza. And he's got a top hat on too. So ultimately, the purpose of all this is to combine picture and text to bridge the world of writing and art into one cohesive communication to tell our story. Let's replace the words where we can with images, and where we can't, we'll use the text. But we don't want to do both at the same time because our readers are not stupid and they don't need to be spoon-fed. I hope you enjoyed that and picked up some useful tips and tricks for your creative toolbox, or some useful bits of information that might inspire you in your creative artwork. In the next episode, we're going to dive a little bit deeper in the composition of your shots, or the pictures that go inside your panels, the action inside the box. Afterwards, I'm going to create a little game and shoot it a lot how we're shooting this, and you're going to use the material from your mind map that you created in the previous episode as the starting off point for creating your own comic book page. If you're keeping up, be sure to hit subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you are the first to know when my next video drops. Help me make this channel better. Hit that like, subscribe, share this, and if there's something you want me to cover or something I've missed, please leave it in the comments below. Just know you need to stay tuned because there's going to be more great content on this channel. Coming from my drawing desk here at Atelier Batista. In case you forgot, though that seems improbable, I'm Brian Batista. My friends call me Bunny, and that's it. So I'm going to say ciao for now.